Hi, and welcome to Immigrant Faith Stories. Immigrant Faith Stories is a platform that showcases diverse and powerful testimonies of Christian immigrants. And I'm Mabel Ninan. I'm a Christian author and speaker and host of this show. On this show, I invite immigrants to share their life stories with you. They share their struggles and challenges, their joys and sorrows, and more importantly, they share how they've experienced God's goodness and faithfulness in their lives, and how their immigrant journey has shaped their spiritual journey. Whether you're an immigrant or not, I hope you can relate to these stories, and I hope that you will find encouragement for your faith journey. Um, my desire is also that these stories will give you a peek inside the lives of your neighbors and friends who are not just immigrants, but also your brothers and sisters in Christ. So subscribe to this channel if you want to be notified about a new video. And you can also visit my website, mabel9.com, for transcripts of this episode, and also to get to know me, get to know more about this show. So without much delay, let's begin today's show. I'm very excited to have a conversation today with Winnie Sato. Winnie and I met at Hope Chapel, Hermosa Beach. My family used to attend this church when we lived in LA for about 4 or 5 years. And I got to know Winnie through her daughter, Darren, who used to babysit my son, Ryan. Winnie and her husband, Brian, are actively involved in serving their church, and they both have also been missionaries to China for more than a decade. And Winnie is passionate about homeschooling, and she is a speaker at many homeschooling conferences. So I'm really excited to talk with her, and welcome to the show, Winnie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, and I forgot to mention where you're from. Winnie emigrated with her family from Hong Kong in 1980, when Hong Kong was still a crown colony of Great Britain. And they came in 1980, and at that time she was only a young girl. So tell us how did you come to America? Why? What reasons? And how was your experience?
Well, my family decided to finally move. Um, my grandfather's generation came first. They came in the 60s. And we didn't come with them, even though I was born. I was born in 68. So we could have followed, in the late 60s, but we didn't because my mom was an only child. And so she couldn't leave her parents, her aging parents. And so we hung out in Hong Kong, grew up, they worked. And when both my mom's parents passed away, then she was free to go. So that's why we waited until the late 70s. And then obviously the reason at that time was there was talk about Hong Kong being handed back over to the communist China. And my dad had left communist China when he was a child. And the thought of going back, or the thought of them coming, moving down to Hong Kong, was pretty scary to them, and with good reason. And so they finally decided that, it was time to leave. And so that's when we filed for immigration application.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about your experience in America as a new immigrant, the first few days and months. What was it like?
It was very, very different. Hong Kong is kind of like New York. The city is always bustling, hustling, and we lived in the middle of the Kowloon Peninsula side. We lived in the middle of it, and there was always noises. We lived in an apartment building. Our flat was on the 11th floor, but there's still a lot of sounds and stuff. And one of the biggest thing, the first night we landed, even though I was exhausted and dead tired, I couldn't sleep because it was so quiet.
Yeah.
We were picked up from LAX, and my dad's cousin had rented us a house. And so we drove probably, I don't know, an hour out to this city called Roland Heights, and suburb, and it was dark. There was nobody on the street, and I'm like, I can't sleep. It's so quiet. That was the biggest thing. And then, the first few weeks was just filled with immigrant stuff, getting your phone, getting a car, getting social security numbers, all that stuff. And luckily my uncles were there and, as God would have it, already paved the way for us. So we just kind of sat down and they just kind of guided us through everything. And it was really great at that point. And then, they took us to all the must see, that me and my brother was still to go to Disneyland, heard so much about it. And, just kind of did the tour thing, the first couple of weeks. And then back then school started like a second week of September. We landed end of August. So we had a couple weeks.
Okay. And so you were a new student in America, and I know that even in Hong Kong, you were a good student. So how did that transition happen as a student from a new, from an education system that you knew to something that was unfamiliar to you?
Yeah, it was, I think it was very interesting. At the end of sixth grade in Hong Kong, that's when the kids moved to, Hong Kong didn't have middle school. So it was just a primary and secondary. So I would have moved into secondary one. And so I knew a school change was coming. I wasn't going to be at my old school. I knew a school change was coming. So the school change part wasn't hard. I kind of expected that, but the hardest part was in junior high is when you start going from classroom to classroom, between classes, and I was like, what is going on? The bell rang and everybody got up and ran. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. And well, the language wasn't a problem because Hong Kong being a Crown British colony, I actually learned English along the same time I learned Chinese, since kindergarten and first grade. So language wasn't a problem. I just could not figure out what was going on when everybody was running back and forth. And so that was a little bewildering. And then language wasn't a problem. And then math was fun because when I was in Hong Kong, I was kind of scraping bottom. When it came to math, I wasn't exactly the model student when it came to math, but Hong Kong was really ahead as far as math compared to United States. So I walked into my 7th grade class, math class, and I looked at the problem on the board. I'm thinking, I already did this, And so long story short, they didn't have a math class for me. They had to go to the school board and get special permission to bus me to the high school to take a math class. It was all very, when you're in junior high and you're the new kid, you just try to stay low, and all of a sudden, at the end of 4th period or whatever it was, the adults came, flanked you out to the bus. It was just kind of weird for a while, but it was after, a couple months, it was fun. It was fine.
And do you make friends easily?
It wasn't hard, I guess, because, at that time, 7th grade was when you change school. Right now they have 6, 7, and 8, but now back then it was 7th grade when you change school. So it was kind of like started the new school with everybody else, sort of, because people came in from different elementary schools. But because I had an accent with my English, I spoke British English at that time. I pretty much gravitated toward Asian-looking friends, but they didn't speak Cantonese. They were from Taiwan, so I kind of had to learn Mandarin on the fly just so that I can communicate with them. So it wasn't, I made a few friends. I was still in touch with my friends in Hong Kong, so I wasn't desperate for new friends, I guess. Yeah. But, God had it all, God had it all prepped for me because he introduced me to, I ran into these friends from Taiwan and they were committed churchgoer. So we had that in common too. So that was good.
That's great. So you had a good time in high school, I assume, then.
I
Was it
did.
fun?
It was, and I didn't realize that it was different from everybody else because of my math background. So I kind of got shoved into this honors program. And then back in those days, there's only like one honors class or one AP class a day. So pretty soon I was in the same class. There were about 30 of us. And pretty soon we're always in the same class, like all the time, like every year. So we became really tight. And then once you're in those classes, there are only certain other extracurricular activities that you can do, you know, either newspaper staff or yearbook staff or student council. So I was pretty much with the same 28, 30 people, like 6 classes a day. So we became close, and there were, you know, the football players, the cheerleaders, the bookworms, and the theater passions, and I didn't realize it at that time, but that was very, very different. Most high schools are very divided, I guess, you know, based on some of these interests and groups. And so it wasn't until I got to college that I realized my high school experience was very, very different. And really by the grace of God, because, you know, I didn't know any better. You know, we were just in the same class all the time. We studied together and we just hung out together. So, yeah.
And tell us about how different or similar was your parents' experience, because they came as adults, and you as a student, you were able to adapt, and you know, you kind of found your groove and you had friends. What about your parents' experience?
Yeah, you know, I really appreciated my parents' efforts because for them, it was monumentally hard. You know, they had to leave everything behind. You know, they grew up to my parents met in elementary school. So they basically have had the same group of friends since they were 10 or 11, you know, and um, I remember we would do picnics together on the weekends. My mom and the other aunties would play mahjong together, and everybody who's your mom's friend is an auntie, even though you're not related. And so I had all these aunties and uncles, and um, I knew that it was pretty hard for my parents. And then with even though they lived in Hong Kong most of their lives, um, they didn't. Their English was heavily accented, and they weren't very fluent in it. And so when they first came, even now after 40 years, they would prefer to speak Chinese over English. And so I appreciated their sorry, excuse my cat.
Okay.
Um, they really, you know, sacrificed a lot for us. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it was so really, really true. You know, my mom gave up a cushy job, so did my dad, and they had a hard time with finding kind of, you know, making a lateral move. And so they ended up doing what a lot of immigrants ended up doing, which was actually not opening a restaurant. My mom didn't want to do that. But they went into kind of government jobs like post office and DMV and stuff like that. So it was a steady paycheck, but it definitely was not measuring up to what they had before. So yeah, and they made most of their friends at church. Church became a big part of our lives every weekend. So that's when they can speak the same language and, you know, have the same experiences and stuff. So yeah.
So tell us more about your church and how you know, it shaped your faith.
My parent. Oh yeah, the church that. Yeah. So it was a very conservative. It was a Chinese church that was affiliated with the Southern Baptist Conference. So I don't think you can be any more conservative than that. And it was primarily an immigrant church. The senior pastor was an immigrant himself. And so what the church really concentrated on, other than preaching the gospel, was really trying to create a sense of community. Every Sunday after church, we would have potluck lunch. Every family brings a little something, and everybody, whoever wants to stay, can stay. And that's when I really saw my parents come alive. You know, it was the same experience, it was the same language. They were all struggling with the same things, you know, being new, being unfamiliar. And so church became, even though my parents were not, I wouldn't call them devout, you know, when we're in Hong Kong, even though my dad grew up in the church. But after we came, because of the community that they felt, church became a big part. You know, they hung out with their church friends on Sunday, and then sometimes Saturday we would also get together, and the kids all hang out together in youth group and stuff. So yeah, God just really kind of gave them a reprieve throughout the week, you know, and then weekends was really a time where they really have fun and be able to enjoy themselves. Yeah.
What about your faith? I know that you were born and raised a Christian in Hong Kong, and now you come to this church. Um, so, how did your faith grow, you personally?
Well, you know, my grandparents became Christians. Missionaries went to China in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and my grandparents lived in a fishing village in the southern coast of China. They became Christians, and then they became pretty devout. They were serving in the church. I remember my grandfather. I've seen pictures of him being a deacon, and my grandmother was a deaconess, and my grandmother had always been, one of the things she always said to me was, love God and serve him. And I pray for you every day, something like she says that to me all the time. And so I practically have gone to church almost as soon as I was coming out of the hospital, I'm sure. And so I've heard it all. I think, and somewhere along the way at my in my youth group here, when I was probably 8th grade, my youth director challenged me. Well, are you or are you not? Because he understood, and I didn't at that time, that I had to call my faith my own. I couldn't ride on my parents' shadow. So, and I really thank God for them because they really showed me, they not only led me to Christ, I mean, really showed me what it meant to have a personal relationship, but they also discipled me in areas of, you need to read your Bible every day, you need to spend time with God every day. And, some of the basic tenets of being a Christian was kind of pounded into me, when you're junior high and high school, you're like, I don't know. But I think looking back, I'm really grateful for what they had done because Bible is a huge part of my life. I love reading the Bible. I love studying the Bible. And as I became married and became a parent, I realized I could not have survived these years without knowing the Bible because it is an important part as a Christian and knowing how to live and deal with the stuff that this world throws at you.
It's amazing how it just takes one or two people to invest in the lives of young people and to kind of lay the foundation
Oh
and
yeah.
takes them forward. So
Oh yeah. They spent 4 years with me. I was in the youth group for 4 years and I cannot even imagine, what it would have been like if they hadn't, been my youth pastor or someone else, or if I had gone a different way. But, God was gracious and put those people in my life and just, really helped me really shape my future and shape my future choices,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So then when you talk about future choices, how did you, feel that calling to be a missionary to China? And when were you able to realize that? Take us through that entire journey.
Well, it was such a God thing. In 1989, when that whole Tiananmen Square incident was happening, I was watching it as a college student. And I was staring at the TV screen thinking, these people really just need the Lord. Even more than democracy or freedom or whatever they think they needed, they really just need the Lord. And I'm bilingual and I am a journalism major, and maybe I can work for CNN. Maybe I'll go back to China. Maybe I'll, get in there, and on the weekends I can work with the house churches, and during the week I can work for CNN. And I had this whole, youthful ambition, everything planned out, but God had other plans, and he took me through a short-term missions project with YWAM, Youth with the Mission, and we went into Eastern Europe that had just opened. The Iron Curtain had just fallen, and we were one of the first groups to go in there, and it was just an incredible time. And my team was praying for each person. YWAM has this thing where they want to pray over each person to find out exactly where God wants them to fit into that trip. So they were praying for me, and I didn't know these people at that time. I've only met them because of the trip. And so I didn't say anything about, how I want to go back to China and all that stuff. And when they were praying for me, one of the guys says, one of the leaders, he said to me, Winnie, God knows your heart for China and he's going to take you there one of these days.
Wow. Wow.
Have you been reading my journal, And I was like, okay. And I was like, okay, God, if this is really what you have for me, then let's go, and then of course, being 19, 20, I was thinking, all right, when I get home, when I graduate from college, I'm gonna go, and of course that's never the case. God is like, I'm not here to do your bidding, God took me through, I met my husband, I married him, and I'm thinking, I don't know where I'm going with this China thing, because he's Japanese American, he didn't speak any Chinese. I'm thinking, okay, Lord, it seems like you're taking me away. And yet at the same time, China keeps coming back to me, China news, with that one child policy and these little girls, and my husband and I decided to adopt one. So we did. And so I started having connections inside China. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, oh, maybe through these orphanages, I can get in there. Nope, it wasn't like that. And then it wasn't, so I got my call in the late 80s, 89, 90. And then it wasn't until 2005 that God finally opened the door. And of course, as God would have it, through a big white church, Hope Chapel, primarily white Caucasian church, with, even though with a diverse group of congregation, from all walks of life and from all races, it was still primarily a big white church, but they had a big heart for mission, and they were sending teams to all over the world, Vietnam, Mexico, South Africa. And I was like, oh Lord, put China in there, and then it was through Hope that I got the connection to a house church in Beijing. And so in 2005, we finally went. So it was 15 years. But God, of course, God never wavered, right? God doesn't change. But over those 15 years, I was like, okay, God, anytime now, we should get on that plane. And he's always like, no, I got other plans for now, wow. So yeah.
So interesting. That's really interesting to me. It's fascinating. Tell us exactly, how did Hope choose you guys to go? How did that happen?
Well, Hope has this philosophy of ministry. If you feel God wants you to do something, you go do it. We'll support you, Yeah. And so after that we were commissioning the Vietnam team. And I distinctly heard in my head, you're going to be commissioned one of these days. I'm like, okay, all right. And so, so I told my husband, and he goes, well, we've been talking about this for so long. I said, I know. And he's like, well, if you're going, I'm going to go too. And I'm like, well, okay, let's go, Yeah. And so then we, at that time, Hope was divided into like districts. So we're like, okay, let's talk to our district pastor. And he's like, all right, well, if God tells you to go, who are we to stand in the way? Let's talk to Pastor Zach, talk to the senior pastor. And we talked to Pastor Zach, and Zach is like, well, I have a connection for you. One of our former members work in Beijing, and he started a group, and he's been asking me to send people there to help him. I'm like, wow, that can only be God. How else would you figure that out, right? Mm-hmm. So we met this guy, and Zach says, oh, he's coming back in 2 weeks. Of course he is. I mean, what would he, So so that was May of 2005. We met the guy. We met Perry. And yes, he runs a small house church at that time in Beijing. Yes. And I said, oh, but other than me, none of our team, my husband doesn't speak English. He goes, that's okay, because 2/3 of my church speak English. Like, okay, God really, when he makes it happen, everything just falls into place. And so, yeah, by November of 2005, we were in China working with a house church. That was our
Wow.
first trip. And then it was the first of 13 trips. It went on for 13 years.
Praise God that he has his own ways and
It was just so God, you wait for 15 years and you think every so often I think, is this ever going to happen? Is it going to happen when I retire? Is it going to happen when, I don't know, hopefully I can still walk, um, but, and then when it happened, it just like, we met Perry, that was his name, in
yeah.
May of 2005. And then by November, we were in Beijing. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yes, God, God usually does that. We have our own plans, but he comes in with his plan and it's better, it's bigger,
Oh, much better.
brings him glory. Yeah, at the perfect time, things turn out. Um, Now, I know that you've been visiting China and you were involved in discipleship and Christian education, working with house churches there for so many years. Um, so tell us, what did you learn from the Chinese Christians? And I know that, as a missionary, you are going there to teach and to impart training, but were you able to take back something if the Chinese Christians have taught you anything or have affected how you pray and worship? Share that with us.
I think the thing that really marked me of all the times that I've been with them, 13 years, even those 2 weeks, just 2 weeks a year. And then during the year, we keep in touch via internet chat. I think what my husband and I always talk about and can never get enough of is their passion.
Yeah.
They are so passionate, and talk about being all in, because their work schedule, they work 10, 12 hours a day. These Chinese company work them hard. And so Sunday is really the only day that they really have together. They don't really have time for mini church or anything like that during the week. And then it's also, kind of dangerous because house churches are illegal inside China. And so they would really only get together on Sundays. And on Sundays, they would gather at like 9:30 for service. They will have lunch together, and then they will stay for maybe a Bible study, or the women will have a women's group, or the men's will have a men's group, or play basketball or whatnot. And then they'll have dinner together, and then they may even break into like a jam session, at 7 or 8 at night. And they spend all day together, and they just want to talk about God, want to hear each other, how things are going, and want to pray for each other. And we contrast that with a lot of Western churches where, the service is over an hour and a half. People are like, I have kickoff, in about 15 minutes, there's a game going on, or I have a birthday party, or I have, it's just the West people are so distracted. I'm guilty too. Sometimes we have family things going on Sundays, but they are just so passionate, and not just because they can be together, but it's because I think their faith really cost them something.
Yeah.
They have to be very careful. The group that we were with, they had been visited by the police a few times, more than a few times over the decade. And yet they keep coming back. They've had to turn around several times when they have an outdoor get together. Some people got detained for hours with their ID information being copied down by the police. And, their faith really, they put it on the line. And sometimes I ask myself, what would I have done if it was happening to me? If I had to, okay, so, well, the government knows all my numbers anyhow, but if I had to, if they did that,
Yeah.
what would I do? Would I still be so blatant about talking to people about it? Will I still be so passionate? Will I still show up every week? And, I think that is one of our biggest takeaways, their passion and their commitment. And when they sing, oh my goodness, when they sing and when they pray, it is, I don't know if I can really describe it. It's moving and it's touching, and you can feel their gratitude for the salvation and the relationship that they have and the freedom that they feel inside this relationship with God.
And all in the backdrop of persecution,
Oh yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that is amazing.
Yeah. A lot of them cover their Bible with brown paper. So, when they pull it out,
Yeah.
nobody knows it is a Bible.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the police have visited that apartment where the church meet a number of times. How come there are Bibles here? And they use bilingual Bibles, so they say, oh, it's for an English class, And they have a piano. The pastor plays the piano really, really well. And so the police says, play for me, because they know that church music use piano. And the guy said, oh no, I play it for my own pleasure. And so the police go, well, play something for me, because he wanted to be sure that the guy's not lying to him. I mean, it's when you live on that edge, your faith is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it must be, so encouraging for you, inspiring to be able to go and visit with them. And I hope and pray
every
that,
year we loved it.
yeah, I hope and pray that you're able to go back. I know that persecution is on the rise in China, and I know that we're all praying, and I hope you can continue to do that. Thank you so much for sharing your story. This was a
Oh
blessing.
yeah, it's been good.
How your life unfolded from a little girl to a missionary to China. And I hope you're enjoying your empty nest. I know it's bittersweet, right? You miss your daughter too.
Well, we were married 10 years before she came along. So, even though it was 18 years, it sounds like a long time, but oh my gosh, it went by so quick.
I know.
You need to treasure every moment you have with Ryan, because it just go by like that.
Yeah, I'm realizing that. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Winnie.
Oh, yeah,
And
I really enjoyed it.
Yep, thank you.